The first thing Detective Alistair Finch noticed wasn't the absence of life. It was the order. Eleanor Vance's house was a sanctuary of silence and tidiness. The rugs perfectly aligned, the books on the shelf organized by color, the bed made with military precision, without a single crease in the sheet. There were no signs of a break-in. No forced doors, no broken windows. The violence, if there was any, had been silent, almost polite. Eleanor was in her favorite armchair, her back to the living room door as if she had fallen asleep while reading. But the book rested closed in her lap, and her gaze was fixed on something no one else could see. The forensics team moved with a reverent care, almost afraid to disturb the peace of the place, afraid to leave their own fingerprints on a scene that seemed untouched. And it was then, next to the armchair on the polished wooden floor, that Alistair saw it. A tiny, almost insignificant object. A small lead soldier, the red paint of its uniform slightly chipped. It stood at attention, its small metal musket pointed at the door. Alistair crouched down without touching it. His eyes scanned the room again. Eleanor was a 70-year-old widow with no children, no grandchildren. There were no photographs of children, no forgotten toys in a corner. The little soldier did not belong there. It wasn't part of Eleanor Vance's story. It was a signature, a message left behind. A silent gift, whose presence screamed louder than any sign of a struggle. Someone had been there. Someone had entered, moved through that house like a ghost and left, leaving behind only a cold, heavy question. Why? Far from the disturbing quiet of Eleanor's house, life in Crestwood Hills followed its predictable rhythm. It was the kind of suburb people choose to escape the chaos, a place where the day's biggest excitement was the ice cream truck passing by at 5 in the afternoon. The morning smelled of freshly cut grass and fresh coffee. Neighbors waved to each other over white picket fences, sharing banalities about the weather. Maple Street, in particular, was the heart of this tranquility. There the houses were almost identical, distinguished only by the color of the doors or the type of flowers in the gardens. And in the house at number 142 lived Arthur Pembroke. To his neighbors, Arthur was the definition of ordinary. A middle-aged man, soft-spoken with a discreet smile. A librarian in the city center. He was seen leaving every morning, promptly at 8 and returning at 6. On weekends, he tended to his immaculate garden, pruning the roses with a monk's patience. He was the neighbor who held the door for you, who picked up your trash from the sidewalk if the wind blew it over. He was a familiar face, a constant presence, and above all, harmless. When the neighborhood kids lost a ball in his yard, he would return it with a gentle nod without saying a word. No one ever went into his house. He had no visitors. He was a private man, and people respected that. In that universe of manufactured normalcy, Arthur's privacy was just another accepted detail, another piece in the puzzle of a community that prided itself on its peace. No one saw the stiffness in his smile, or the emptiness in his eyes when he thought no one was looking. In Crestwood Hills, the surface was all that mattered. And Arthur Pembroke's surface was perfect. Alistair Finch's office was the opposite of Eleanor Vance's house, a chaotic mess of papers, cold coffee cups, and the lingering smell of sleepless nights. At the center of the disorder, on the desk, the lead soldier stood sentinel under a lamplight, the only object in perfect focus. Alistair wasn't looking for other murderers. He was looking for artists, ghosts. He searched through cold cases, in cardboard boxes that smelled of dust and time. Domestic accidents, deaths by undetermined causes. He ignored reports of explicit violence and read the footnotes, the observations dismissed as irrelevant. And then he found it, a case from 10 years ago. A retired metalworker, dead from an accidental fall in his own workshop. The report was dry, bureaucratic, but at the end a note from a rookie cop found a peculiar object at the scene, a small porcelain ballerina on the workbench. Family does not recognize the item. The case was closed another 15 years prior. A reclusive woman, death attributed to a sudden massive allergic reaction. Hidden under the sofa cushion, a carved wooden top. The victim's sister told the police she hated trinkets. The case was filed away, the ballerina the top, and now the soldier. Alistair leaned back in his chair, the old leather creaking in the office's silence. These weren't murders. They were collections, each victim an acquisition, each toy a macabre receipt, the signature of a collector who didn't take objects but the lives that surrounded them. The air grew cold, Eleanor Vance's killer wasn't new. He was an untold legend, a ghost who had haunted this city for decades, moving through the cracks of normality, completely unseen. The municipal library was Arthur Pembroke's domain, a place of silence, order, and the faint smell of aging paper. There he was a figure of quiet authority. His movements as he stamped books were methodical, hypnotic, his face a mask of passive kindness. A mother and her young son were reading a picture book at a nearby table. The boy was playing with a small green plastic dinosaur, making it jump between the pages. Suddenly the toy slipped from his hand, rolled across the floor and stopped beside Arthur's impeccably polished shoes. The stamping ceased. Arthur's hands hovered over the counter. His eyes, once vacant, became razors, locked onto the plastic dinosaur. The low hum of the library, the turning of pages, the entire world seemed to retreat into absolute silence. There was only him and that small object. For an instant, the mask of normalcy melted. His jaw tightened. A gleam of hunger, of an ancient and dark possessiveness crossed his face. It was the stillness of a predator that has spotted its prey. The mother, noticing, stood up. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she said, leaning down to pick up the toy. Her voice broke the spell. Arthur blinked. The gentle neighbor was back. With a rehearsed fluidity, he bent down, picked up the dinosaur before she could, and held it out to the boy. "Be careful not to lose it," Arthur said. His voice was soft, almost a whisper, but his eyes were empty, cold as glass. His hand lingered a second too long before releasing the toy, his thumb caressing the curve of the plastic. He returned to his post. The sound of the stamp resumed, rhythmic, constant, but the crack had been exposed. In that silence, everyone in the library could hear the sound of something breaking, even without knowing where it came from. The night air was cold when Alistair Finch arrived at 142 Maple Street. He didn't use the flashing lights or the uniform backup. This was personal. This was a conversation between two artists. He walked up the path, the lead soldier heavy in his coat pocket, a key ready to unlock the final piece of his masterpiece. Arthur Pembroke opened the door before he could knock, his face pale and anxious. "Detective, is everything all right?" Alistair offered a thin, reassuring smile. "Just a few more questions, Mr. Pembroke, may I?" The house was not what Alistair expected. Where he anticipated sterile order, a reflection of his own meticulousness, he found life. It was cluttered, but not with filth. It was the clutter of a lonely existence. Stacks of books spilling from shelves, half-finished crossword puzzles on a coffee table, photographs of people Alistair didn't recognize, smiling from another era. It was messy, human, and deeply, disappointingly normal. Arthur wrung his hands. "I don't understand what this is about. That poor woman, Eleanor, she was perfect, wasn't she?" Alistair's voice was soft, almost reverent. He walked through the room, his fingers grazing the dusty spines of books. The order she created, it was a beautiful canvas. It demanded a signature. He turned, his eyes locking onto Arthur's, like the metalworker, or the woman with the allergies. Each one a perfect silent sculpture. Arthur paled, taking a step back. I read about those accidents." "There are no accidents," Alistair said, his smile widening. He reached into his coat and placed the lead soldier on the coffee table. Then another pocket, and he produced a delicate porcelain ballerina. From a third, a carved wooden top. They stood together, a silent, damning trio. There is only design, a collection. Alistair watched Arthur's face, waiting for the flicker of recognition, the pride of a fellow connoisseur. But all he saw was pure, unadulterated terror. Arthur wasn't admiring the collection. He was looking at evidence. And in that moment, Alistair understood. Arthur wasn't his peer. He was just another canvas. "I saw you today," Alistair continued, his tone shifting, becoming cold and instructive. "At the library, with the little boy's dinosaur." He took a step closer. Arthur was frozen, trapped between the detective and the wall. "I saw the look in your eye. That hunger. I thought you understood. The need to acquire, to preserve a perfect moment." Alistair reached into his final pocket. "But you don't, do you?" he whispered, his voice full of a strange pity. "You were just afraid of losing something. I, on the other hand, am not afraid of taking it." He opened his hand. Resting on his palm, gleaming under the dim lamplight, was the small green plastic dinosaur. Arthur's breath hitched. His eyes darted from the dinosaur to Alistair's face. The detective's smile was gone. replaced by a look of serene ownership. The hunter had not found another hunter. He had found his next piece. The man who had spent decades cataloguing death was simply adding to his library. And Arthur Pembroke was the overdue book. The world shrank to the size of a green plastic dinosaur. Arthur's mind, which had been racing with fear and denial, went completely silent. The man in front of him wasn't a detective. He was a void. "You see," Alistair said, his voice a low academic murmur, "people see chaos, they see violence, passion, greed. But I see art, the beauty of a life brought to its perfect final stillness." He stepped around the coffee table, his movements slow and deliberate, like a curator handling a priceless artifact. "I thought you were one of me," Alistair continued, a note of genuine disappointment in his tone. "I thought you understood the beauty of precision, but you're just another piece. A lonely man in a cluttered house, a life of quiet desperation. You're a perfect exhibit for my collection on solitude." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't pull a weapon. He simply reached out and placed a hand on Arthur's shoulder. The touch was not violent, but it was impossibly heavy. Arthur's vision began to tunnel, the edges blurring to black. The last thing he saw was Alistair's face, his expression one of calm, professional satisfaction. Hours later, the first rays of dawn touched the window of 142 Maple Street. Inside, everything was quiet. Arthur Pembroke sat in his favorite armchair facing the window, his expression peaceful. On the windowsill, catching the morning light, a small green plastic dinosaur stood perfectly still. Outside, a car door slammed. Detective Alistair Finch stepped onto the sidewalk, his face etched with professional concern. He had just received a call about a neighbor who hadn't been seen all morning. It was time to go to work. The first sensation was light, a dull hazy orange pressing against eyelids that wouldn't open. The second was sound, a high thin ringing that slowly gave way to the chirp of a distant bird. Arthur Pembroke was adrift in a sea of his own consciousness, a ghost tethered to a body that refused to obey. He was awake, he was screaming, but the sound never left his skull. He tried to move a finger. Nothing, then he heard it. The familiar creak of his own front door, followed by heavy footsteps. A new voice cut through the fog, a voice that turned Arthur's silent panic into pure, crystalline terror. It was calm, authoritative, and sickeningly familiar. "Easy, everyone, let's not disturb anything." It was Alistair Finch. The footsteps drew closer. Alistair entered the living room, and for a moment his eyes met Arthur's. A paramedic knelt beside Arthur's chair, shining a small light into his unblinking eyes. "He's got a pulse, a strong one." "Locked-in syndrome?" Yes, I'm here, help me," Arthur pleaded with his eyes. Alistair walked slowly around the room. A man of routine, something must have broken him. He paused, his gaze drifting to the windowsill. And what's this? The small green plastic dinosaur, the signature. As paramedics prepared a stretcher, Alistair leaned down, his face close to Arthur's, his voice a whisper, a blade of ice meant only for him. "Welcome to the permanent collection, Mr. Pembroke. You're the most beautiful piece yet." As they lifted him, carrying him out of his own home, Arthur's eyes were locked on the detective. The survivor, the only one who knew the truth, was being carried away to a life sentence of silence, his body the killer's finest exhibit. Sound of a steady, rhythmic heart monitor. Alistair Finch pulled a chair to the bedside. He admired his work, the stillness, the perfect living silence. "This is your gallery now, Arthur," Alistair purred. "An exhibit of one, the ultimate piece in my collection on solitude. You see, I'm an artist, but you are art." He leaned in, savoring the moment. The fear in your eyes that night, exquisite. A shame no one else will ever get to appreciate it. For the first time in days, the body in the bed moved. A thumb pressed a button on the remote. The television on the wall flickered on, displaying grainy footage of a dark street. Of Alistair placing a small lead soldier, then a ballerina, then a wooden top. Alistair's smile froze, then collapsed into a mask of pure shock. He stared at the screen, then back at the man in the bed. Arthur's head turned slowly on the pillow. His eyes, no longer filled with terror, were sharp, intelligent, and cold as ice. The heart monitor continued its steady, unwavering rhythm. "A common mistake," Arthur said, his voice clear and precise, cutting through the silence. "You thought you were the only collector." He smiled. "You collect objects, Alistair. Little trinkets from broken lives. It's crude, unimaginative. Alistair was speechless, his mind reeling. I, on the other hand, Arthur continued, his smile widening, I collect artists, and you, detective, are my masterpiece. Alistair Finch admired his work. This is your gallery now, Arthur, he purred. You are art. He leaned in. The fear in your eyes that night, exquisite. But as Alistair gloated, Arthur's mind was a fortress of cold calculation. He remembered his obsession, not with trinkets, but with a monster hiding in plain sight. He remembered hiring the investigator, the man who confirmed his suspicions. He remembered planting the cameras, turning the hunter's own home into a cage of surveillance. And he remembered the final piece of his plan, the neurotoxin. A temporary paralysis, a perfect trap. For the first time, the body in the bed moved. A thumb pressed a button. The television flickered on, showing Alistair in his own study, confessing to his reflection. Alistair's smile froze. He stared at the screen, then at the man in the bed. Arthur's head turned slowly. His eyes were sharp, intelligent, and cold as ice. The heart monitor continued its steady, unwavering rhythm. A common mistake, Arthur said, his voice clear and precise. You thought you were the only collector. He smiled. You collect objects, Alistair, little trinkets from broken lives. It's crude. Alistair was speechless. I, on the other hand, Arthur continued, his smile widening. I collect artists, and you, detective, are my masterpiece. The silence in the room was a canvas, and Alistair's ragged breathing was the first violent splash of paint. No, it's a lie, he whispered, his eyes wide with the frantic terror I had once felt. Third trick, he finally roared, lunging towards the screen, as if smashing the image could smash the truth. But before he could reach it, the door flew open. Police, their faces were grim, their weapons steady. They saw the scene, the city's celebrated detective, a wild animal cornered, and the patient in the bed watching with serene detachment. The toxin is fading, Alistair, I announced, my voice calm. It was designed to hold me just long enough for you to come admire your work. I felt the first stirrings of control return to my limbs. As we speak, every hidden camera file is being delivered to your department. And to the press. Alistair turned, his face a grotesque mask of fury. He framed me, he screamed, pointing a trembling finger. But his accusations were drowned out by the click of handcuffs. They dragged him away, a raving ruin. I watched him go, the final, most prized piece of my collection. The artist, imprisoned forever within the frame of his own hubris. Before I was a work of art, I was a father. My world wasn't made of silence and vengeance, but of the sound of my daughter Lily's laughter, and the smell of turpentine in her studio. She was my son, art was her breath. She painted her dreams, her hopes, and I watched a universe be born on her canvases. She wore a silver locket, a lily I gave her. It was her talisman. Then one night, her universe went dark. The police called it a suicide. A predictable tragedy, they said. Detective Alistair Finch, the city's hero, was the first to offer his condolences. Artistic souls are fragile, Mr. Pembroke, he said, his sympathy rehearsed. Your daughter was a tragic masterpiece. His words were honey-coated poison. Weeks passed in a cold vacuum until I found her hidden journal. At first it was sketches of light, but the final pages were a nightmare. Notes about an older man, an admirer who understood her like no one else. He called her his collection of one. The blood in my veins ran cold. Lily's locket was nowhere to be found. I started digging. I looked into Finch's cases. Other young artists, all gone too soon, all classified as tortured souls. In every case, Finch was the lead detective. In every case, a small personal object went missing. I saw the monstrous truth. Alistair Finch didn't solve crimes, he curated them. He wasn't a detective, he was a collector. A predator who disguised himself as a shepherd. He stole my daughter's life and turned her into an anecdote in his sick collection. In that moment, in the silence of my study, the grief died and something else was born. A cold clarity, a steel resolve. He saw people as art, fine. I would become an artist too. My masterpiece wouldn't be painted with oils, but with fear, paranoia, and a terrible poetic justice. He collected objects from broken lives. I would collect the artist himself. The hunt had begun.